In World War II, a secret war raged. One fought not with guns, but with radio waves and coded messages. Invisible signals carried secrets across enemy lines, and a single intercepted message could change the fate of nations. Clandestine radio operators risked everything. A single mistake could mean death. Among these hidden heroes was a teenager, Knut Haugland, who used his homemade radio to outwit the Nazis. At 19, Knut's technical genius and courage made him a vital asset to the Allies. He decoded enemy plans and warned of attacks, all from the shadows of occupied Norway. This is the story of how a young mind, tuned to freedom, became one of the war's sharpest weapons. Knut Haugland grew up in Rjukan, Norway, obsessed with radios and electricity. While others played outside, Knut scavenged parts and built his first working radio at 16. Night after night he tuned in to distant broadcasts, teaching himself Morse code and the art of listening. His bedroom became a laboratory, his hands mastering circuits and signals. Every message he decoded, every device he built, sharpened his skills for a war he didn't know was coming. Knut's passion for radio was more than a hobby. It was training for a life of espionage. Soon his secret talent would become a lifeline for the Allied cause. In the quiet valley of Rjukan, Knut's fascination with radio opened a window to the world. He built his own receiver from scrap, learning through trial and error. Late at night, he listened to news and music from across Europe, expanding his horizons beyond Norway. Each station he found connected him to the tense, changing world of the 1930s. Knut's homemade radio was more than a device. It was his link to a future shaped by conflict. His curiosity was quietly preparing him for the challenges ahead. Alone in his room, Knut discovered Morse code, a language of dots and dashes that unlocked the secrets of the airwaves. He practiced for hours, building his own telegraph key and mastering the rhythm of coded messages. Soon he could pick out hidden transmissions, learning to distinguish friend from foe by sound alone. Each session honed his focus and analytical mind, skills that would prove vital in wartime. Knut wasn't just listening, he was training to become a master of secret communication. His self-taught expertise would soon make him indispensable to the resistance. Knut's knowledge was practical. He built, repaired, and improved radios with whatever he could find. He learned to boost signals, improvise antennas, and fix broken parts under pressure. This relentless tinkering made him a true innovator, ready for the demands of espionage. As Europe edged toward war, Knut sensed the urgency in the airwaves. His skills, honed in solitude, would soon be tested in the fight against Nazi occupation. What began as a teenage obsession became a weapon for freedom. Knut's homemade radios would help turn the tide of war from the shadows. In April 1940, the storm that Knut had sensed brewing on the airwaves finally broke over Norway. The idyllic peace of his homeland was shattered by the sudden brutal force of the Nazi invasion. German warships steamed into the fjords, paratroopers descended from the sky, and columns of tanks and soldiers rolled through the streets of cities and towns that had known peace for over a century. The Norwegian army, vastly outnumbered and outgunned, fought bravely but was ultimately overwhelmed. In just 62 days the country fell. The Norwegian king and his government fled into exile, leaving their people to face a dark and uncertain future under the heel of a foreign occupier. The shadow of the swastika now stretched over the mountains and valleys of Knut's home. Life changed overnight. The familiar rhythms of Norwegian society were replaced by the harsh, unyielding dictates of the occupying force. German soldiers became a common sight on every street corner, their presence a constant, chilling reminder of who was now in control. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of assembly were extinguished. A climate of fear and suspicion descended upon the nation as the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police, began its ruthless work of crushing any and all dissent. Neighbors became wary of neighbors, and a careless word could lead to a midnight knock on the door, followed by arrest, interrogation, and disappearance into a prison or concentration camp. For Knut Haugland, the occupation brought a very specific and personal threat. The Nazis understood the power of information better than anyone. They knew that uncontrolled communication was the lifeblood of resistance. To maintain their grip on the populace, they needed to control not only what people saw and said, but also what they heard. One of their very first decrees was the confiscation of all privately owned radio receivers. Citizens were ordered to turn in their radios to the authorities. The only broadcasts legally permitted were those from German-controlled stations, which pumped out a relentless stream of propaganda designed to demoralize the Norwegian people and glorify the Reich. This new law transformed Knut's passion into a potential death sentence. His collection of homemade devices, once a source of pride and fascination, was now classified as illegal contraband. The simple act of possessing an unauthorized radio, let alone one capable of transmitting signals, was deemed an act of subversion against the new regime. The penalties were severe and brutally enforced. Anyone caught listening to Allied broadcasts from London faced a long prison sentence. Anyone caught operating a transmitter faced something far worse: immediate execution. Knut Haugland, now in his early 20s, stood at a crossroads. He could surrender his radios, abandon his skills, and live quietly under tyranny, or he could choose a far more dangerous path. The Nazi radio ban was more than just a tool of censorship, it was a declaration of war on the very airwaves themselves. The Germans deployed specialized units known as the Peilgruppen, or direction-finding teams. These were technological hunters, equipped with sophisticated triangulation vehicles that constantly roamed the cities and countryside. Their sole mission was to sweep the radio spectrum, listening for the faintest whisper of an illegal transmission. They were the hounds of the Gestapo, and a clandestine radio signal was the scent they were trained to follow. The operators of these vehicles were experts, capable of pinpointing the location of a hidden transmitter with frightening speed and accuracy, turning any broadcast into a deadly race against time. The occupiers' fear of the radio was entirely justified. In the silence imposed by the Nazis, the airwaves became one of the last free spaces, a vital link to the outside world. For Norwegians huddled in secret around a forbidden receiver, the crackling voice of King Haakon VII, broadcasting from London, was a beacon of hope. It was a defiant reminder that their nation was not forgotten and that the fight was not over. These clandestine listening sessions were acts of quiet rebellion, fueling the spirit of resistance and keeping the flame of patriotism alive in the darkest of times. The information gleaned from these broadcasts, real news about the war effort, was a powerful antidote to the poison of German propaganda. For a young man like Knut, who had spent his entire teenage life mastering this technology, the radio ban was an intolerable oppression. It was an assault on his identity and his passion. To surrender his equipment would be like surrendering a part of himself. While many Norwegians complied with the order out of fear for their safety, Knut made a different choice. He saw his skills not as a liability to be hidden, but as a weapon to be wielded. He understood that if the Nazis were so afraid of a simple radio signal, then that signal must possess an immense power. He resolved that he would not hide his knowledge, he would use it to fight back. This decision was not made lightly. Knut was fully aware of the risks involved. He had seen the posters announcing the dire consequences for those caught with illegal radios. He knew about the Peilgruppen and their relentless hunts. Yet the thought of standing by while his country was subjugated was unbearable. Instead of dismantling his radios, he began to improve them. He worked on making them smaller, more portable, and harder to detect. He started thinking like a spy, considering how to operate in the shadows, how to transmit and disappear before the hunters could close in. Knut wasn't just going to break the law, he was going to turn the Nazis' technological war back against them. As the occupation tightened its grip, a new, clandestine army began to form in the shadows of Norwegian society. It was known as the Milorg, the military wing of the Norwegian resistance. This was a secret network of ordinary citizens, teachers, farmers, fishermen, and students who refused to accept defeat. They organized themselves into a decentralized force, dedicated to acts of sabotage, intelligence gathering, and preparing for the day of liberation. They were a ghost army, operating in secret cells, their members often unknown to one another, bound by a shared commitment to freeing their country from Nazi rule. It was a perilous existence, where trust was the most valuable currency, and betrayal meant certain death. Knut Haugland did not hesitate to join their ranks. His unique and highly specialized skills made him an incredibly valuable asset to the fledgling resistance movement. While others could handle explosives or organize escape routes, Knut possessed a mastery of radio technology that was almost unheard of. He could build, repair, and operate the very devices that were essential for the resistance to communicate with its leaders in exile and its allies in Great Britain. In a war where information was as critical as ammunition, Knut was the equivalent of a master armorer. He became the technical genius behind the Resistance's earliest communication efforts. He was just 20 years old. His initial role was to build and maintain radios for other resistance cells, teaching operators the basics of clandestine transmission. But his talents quickly drew the attention of a more elite organization, the British Special Operations Executive, or SOE. The SOE was Winston Churchill's secret army, tasked with setting Europe ablaze by supporting resistance movements across the continent. They needed skilled radio operators, pianists as they were called, to be their eyes and ears behind enemy lines. They were looking for individuals who possessed not only technical expertise, but also nerves of steel and the courage to operate under the most extreme pressure imaginable. Knut Haugland was the perfect candidate for this daunting role. In 1941, after making contact with an SOE agent, Knut was whisked out of Norway and taken to Great Britain for intensive training. There he honed his skills in cryptography, advanced radio techniques, and the brutal art of survival. He was being prepared for missions that were considered virtual suicide runs. The life expectancy of a radio operator in occupied territory was measured in weeks, but Knut was undeterred. The Allies gave him a new, custom-built radio set, a powerful piece of equipment codenamed Sweetheart, small enough to be carried in a suitcase. Armed with this device and his own formidable intellect, he was dropped by parachute back into the frozen wilderness of his occupied homeland, ready to begin his one-man war of the airwaves. Returning to Norway as a trained agent of the Special Operations Executive was a world away from being a teenage hobbyist. Knut Haugland was no longer just defying a ban. He was an active combatant in a secret war, a ghost sent to haunt the Nazi communication networks. His primary mission was codenamed Grouse, and his objective was deceptively simple: to establish a reliable intelligence link between the Norwegian resistance on the ground and the Allied command in London. Dropped into the vast, snow-covered Hardanger Plateau, he was utterly alone, a single man against the might of the German occupation. His only companions were the biting wind, the deep snow, and the powerful radio transceiver strapped to his back. The success of future operations depended entirely on his ability to survive and transmit. His radio, the Sweetheart set provided by the British, was a marvel of miniaturized 1940s technology, but it was still a fragile and demanding piece of equipment. It was not a simple device you could just switch on. It required a power source, a carefully calibrated antenna, and a deep understanding of atmospheric conditions to send a clear signal across the North Sea to Great Britain. Knut had to become an expert in improvisation. When conventional batteries ran low or were unavailable, he had to engineer his own power solutions, often creating hand-cranked generators or even makeshift pedal-powered systems using bicycle parts. This ingenuity was not just a matter of convenience, it was a matter of survival in the desolate wilderness. The information he was tasked with sending was of the highest importance. He wasn't just reporting on local troop patrols, he was a key node in a much larger intelligence network. He relayed critical details about German naval movements along the heavily fortified Norwegian coast, providing the Royal Navy with the information needed to intercept supply ships and warships. He transmitted reports on the morale of the occupying forces, the locations of fuel depots, and the industrial output of factories that had been co-opted for the German war machine. Each message was a carefully constructed puzzle piece, helping analysts in London build a clearer picture of the enemy's strength and intentions. Operating the station was a lonely and nerve-wracking existence. For weeks at a time, Knut would live in complete isolation, moving between remote, abandoned hunting cabins and makeshift shelters dug into the snow. His only contact with the outside world was the rhythmic pulse of Morse code in his headphones. He was a phantom, his presence known only to a handful of contacts in the resistance and his unseen handlers in Britain. Every single transmission was a calculated risk, a beacon that could potentially alert the German direction-finding teams to his presence. He lived under a constant, crushing pressure, knowing that a single mistake could compromise not only himself but the entire intelligence operation he represented. Knut Haugland's work was far more complex than simply sending messages. A significant part of his mission involved listening. He spent countless hours with his headphones on, meticulously scanning the radio frequencies used by the German military. He became intimately familiar with the patterns and protocols of the Luftwaffe pilots, the Wehrmacht ground units, and the Kriegsmarine naval patrols. He learned to recognize the call signs of specific units and the distinct Morse code fist of individual German operators. This deep immersion allowed him to build a mental map of the enemy's communication network, identifying key command channels and patterns of activity that signaled an impending operation or troop movement. This was the art of signals intelligence, or SIGINT. Knut wasn't just passively receiving information, he was actively hunting for it within the chaos of the airwaves. He would tune into Luftwaffe channels, listening for conversations about aircraft readiness, patrol routes and bomb loads. This information, when relayed quickly to London, could provide precious minutes of warning for Allied bomber crews or help the RAF plan intercept missions. He listened to German naval communications, trying to decipher coded messages about U-boat patrols in the North Atlantic, information that could save countless Allied lives and vital tons of war material, making the perilous journey across the ocean. The most valuable intelligence was often encrypted, hidden behind complex codes that changed on a daily basis. While Knut was not a Bletchley Park cryptographer, his role was the essential first step in breaking those codes. He had to flawlessly intercept the encrypted Morse code messages, transcribing them with perfect accuracy. Any error in his transcription would render the message useless to the codebreakers in Britain. This required immense concentration, as he often worked in freezing conditions, exhausted and hungry, with the constant fear of discovery gnawing at him. He was the vital first link in a chain that stretched from a German transmitter in Norway to the top-secret decoding rooms of the Allied war effort. Beyond interception, his own transmissions had to be a masterclass in clandestine procedure. He could never transmit for more than a few minutes at a time, as the German Peilgruppen could get a fix on a signal within 20 minutes. Every message was condensed and coded before he even touched the telegraph key. He had to set up his antenna, transmit his vital information, and then pack up his entire station and disappear back into the wilderness before the hunters could even begin to close in on his position. It was a high-stakes symphony of secrets, a delicate performance where one false note would bring the final curtain down with deadly force. The Hardanger Plateau, this vast and barren mountain region where Knut often operated, was both his sanctuary and, honestly, his prison. Its sheer size and inhospitable terrain offered a kind of protection from German patrols, who were, well, pretty reluctant to venture too far from established roads and towns. The freezing temperatures and deep snows that made life so difficult for Knut also served as a powerful deterrent to his enemies. He learned to use the brutal landscape to his advantage, hiding his equipment in snow caves or remote cabins that were, for much of the year, almost impossible to reach. This unforgiving environment became his greatest ally, shielding him from the prying eyes of the occupation forces who dominated the valleys below. Life in these mountain stations was a constant struggle for survival. Food was scarce, and Knut relied on the support of a few trusted resistance contacts in nearby villages, folks who would risk their own lives to supply him with meager rations. Warmth was a luxury he could rarely afford. A fire for cooking or heat produced smoke, a visible sign that could easily betray his location to a passing German patrol plane. More often than not, he endured the biting cold in silence, his body numb but his mind sharply focused on the mission at hand. He was waging a modern technological war while living in conditions that were almost primitive, and honestly, that stark contrast really defined his daily existence. From these remote outposts, Knut became a critical intelligence hub. He acted as the primary communication link for Operation Gunnerside, the legendary sabotage mission to destroy the heavy water production facility at Vemork. This plant was a vital component of the Nazi nuclear weapons program, and its destruction was a top Allied priority. Knut's radio was the sole means for the commando team on the ground to communicate with London. He relayed their status reports, received updated orders, and most crucially, sent the confirmation signal that the plant had been successfully sabotaged. Without his reliable and courageous work, the entire operation would have been flying blind. The success of the Vemork mission highlighted the incredible importance of Knut's role. He was not just a passive observer, he was an active participant in one of the most daring and strategically significant commando raids of the entire war. His ability to maintain a communications link under such extreme pressure while being hunted by the enemy was nothing short of miraculous. His mountain station, a lonely speck in the vast Norwegian wilderness, had become the nerve center for a mission that dealt a crippling blow to Hitler's atomic ambitions. His dots and dashes, sent from a freezing cabin, had a direct and lasting impact on the course of World War II. The Germans were not ignorant of the fact that a high-powered Allied radio station was operating somewhere on the Hardanger Plateau. The success of missions like Gunnerside was proof that the resistance had a direct line to London. In response, the Nazis intensified their hunt for the elusive operator. They dedicated more resources to the Pilgruppen, those specialized direction-finding units. These teams were relentless, deploying their sensitive equipment all across the region, hoping to catch the faint electronic whisper that would betray Knut's position. The hunt was constant and systematic, a technological dragnet that was slowly but surely tightening around him, turning his isolated sanctuary into a shrinking cage. Knut lived with the daily reality of this hunt. He knew that every time he pressed his telegraph key, he was essentially shouting his location to a listening enemy. This knowledge shaped his every action. He developed a strict routine of radio discipline, never staying in one location for more than a few transmissions. He became a master of camouflage, learning how to hide his antenna wire against tree branches or run it beneath the surface of the snow. He constantly had to think 3 steps ahead of his pursuers, anticipating their search patterns and moving his entire operation, radio, batteries, and personal gear, frequently, often in the dead of night through treacherous, blizzard-swept terrain. The psychological toll of this constant threat was immense. The strain of perpetual vigilance, combined with the physical hardships of hunger, cold, and extreme isolation would have broken most people. Every snap of a twig, every distant engine sound could signal the arrival of a German patrol. The static in his headphones was not just noise, it was a constant reminder of the invisible enemy that was searching for him. Yet, Knut possessed an inner resilience, a core of steel forged in his youth. His focus on the mission, his belief in the cause he was fighting for, allowed him to push past the fear and continue his vital work against all odds. This deadly cat-and-mouse game was the ultimate test of his skills and his nerve. He was pitting his wits, his technical knowledge, and his deep understanding of the terrain against the organized, technological might of the German security forces. He was not just an operator, he was a survivor, an escape artist, and in a way, a ghost who refused to be caught. The ever-present hunt forced him to innovate and adapt constantly, pushing him to the very limits of human endurance. It was in this crucible of fear and pressure that the teenage radio genius truly became one of the most effective and courageous secret agents of the war. One frigid winter night, deep in the heart of the Norwegian forest, Knut was in the middle of a critical transmission. He was relaying urgent intelligence about a planned German troop movement, information that could save hundreds of Allied lives. The message was long and complex, requiring his utmost concentration. The air was still, the silence of the snow-covered landscape broken only by the faint hum of his radio equipment and the rhythmic tapping of his telegraph key. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the quiet, a sound that made his blood run cold. It was a soft, metallic click from the nearby road, the unmistakable noise of a German direction-finding vehicle coming to a stop. They had locked onto his signal. The hunters had found him. The Pilgruppen were no longer just a distant threat, they were outside his hiding place, mere yards away. Panic was not an option. Every second was critical. With a surge of adrenaline, Knut instantly cut the transmission mid-sentence, yanking the power cables from his set. He didn't have time to pack carefully. He scrambled to disconnect the antenna, stuffing the precious radio into its case and strapping it to his back. He could hear the muffled sounds of German voices now, the crunch of boots on frozen snow. There was no time to think, only to act. He burst out of the back of the small cabin and plunged headlong into the darkness of the dense forest. He ran for his life, the heavy radio bouncing awkwardly on his back, branches whipping at his face. He didn't dare look behind him, he just pushed forward, deeper and deeper into the wilderness, putting as much distance as possible between himself and the German patrol. The chase was on, but it was a silent one. Knut knew the terrain intimately, its hidden gullies and thickets providing cover that the German soldiers lacked. He moved with the desperate agility of a cornered animal, his survival instincts taking over completely. That night, he did not find another shelter. He slept under the dense boughs of a snow-laden spruce tree, shivering from the cold but alive and, crucially, with his radio intact. This terrifyingly close encounter was a brutal lesson in the razor-thin margin for error in his line of work. It demonstrated just how quickly the hunters could close in, and how one extra moment of transmission could have meant his capture or death. The experience, however, did not break his spirit, it sharpened it. He became even more meticulous, more disciplined in his procedures. He learned to operate with even greater speed and efficiency, treating every single broadcast as if the enemy were just outside the door. This incident was not just a lucky escape, it was a crucible that forged him into a more formidable and cautious operative, ready for the next phase of his secret war. Knut's ability to survive depended not just on his technical skill and his endurance in the wilderness, but also on his sheer audacious cunning. As the German hunt intensified, operating from remote mountain cabins became increasingly risky. He was forced to move his operations closer to populated areas, hiding in plain sight, which required a completely new level of ingenuity. In one legendary instance, he set up his station in the attic of a safe house in a small town. This new environment presented a different kind of danger. It wasn't about surviving the cold, it was about surviving surprise inspections from suspicious German patrols, who could appear at the door at any moment without any warning. His solution was a masterful piece of psychological misdirection. He disguised his precious sweetheart radio set, the advanced piece of Allied technology, as a common broken-down phonograph player. He built a crude wooden casing around the radio, complete with a turntable and a tone arm that served no actual function. He placed a stack of old, scratchy folk music records next to the device to complete the illusion. To any casual observer, it was just a piece of harmless junk, a dusty old record player that someone hadn't gotten around to throwing away. It was a brilliant cover, hiding a weapon of war behind a mask of mundane domestic clutter, a perfect example of his creative thinking. The day inevitably came when his cover story was put to the test. Two German officers, acting on a tip from an informant, arrived to conduct a thorough search of the house. Knut's heart pounded as he heard their heavy boots on the stairs leading up to the attic. As they entered the room, their eyes scanned every corner, looking for any sign of illegal equipment. When they saw the phonograph, one of the officers pointed at it suspiciously. Thinking fast, Knut feigned annoyance at the interruption, calmly walked over to the device, and with a confident flourish, put a record on the turntable and dropped the needle. He had cleverly rigged the on-off switch to play a real record, a feature completely separate from the radio's hidden function. As the tinny, cheerful sound of a Norwegian folk tune filled the attic, the tension in the room instantly evaporated. The German officers exchanged a look, seemingly convinced. Their suspicion turned to mild amusement at the sight of the seemingly obsolete technology and the scratchy music. They completed a cursory search of the rest of the attic before turning to leave, satisfied that their informant had been wrong. They had been standing mere feet away from one of the most wanted pieces of equipment in Norway, completely fooled by a teenager's brilliant improvisation. Knut had stared directly into the face of the enemy and, with nothing but a clever disguise and nerves of steel, had won the confrontation. Knut's cover stories were not just one-off tricks, they were an essential part of his operational strategy, allowing him to adapt to ever-changing circumstances. He understood that the best place to hide something is often where people would least expect to find it. The phonograph was just one example of his inventive mind at work. On other occasions, he concealed his radio components inside hollowed-out books on a shelf, or disassembled the entire set and hid the individual parts, the tubes, wires, and coils, among a chaotic jumble of tools in a farmer's workshop. His ability to see the potential for concealment in everyday objects was a form of genius in itself. This constant need to improvise pushed his creativity to its limits. When he needed to recharge batteries in an urban environment where a hand-crank generator would be too noisy and suspicious, he devised a plan. He would connect his batteries to the electrical system of a bicycle that was hooked up to a training stand. To any curious onlookers, it simply appeared that he was getting some indoor exercise, a perfectly normal activity. In reality, with every push of the pedals, he was secretly generating the precious electrical power he needed to send his next vital message to London. This blend of technical knowledge and creative subterfuge made him an exceptionally difficult agent to track down. His talent for deception extended to his personal identity as well. While operating near towns and villages, he couldn't simply be a mysterious stranger. He had to adopt plausible cover stories posing as a traveling salesman, a repairman, or even a student visiting relatives. He had to be a convincing actor, able to engage in casual conversation with locals and even German soldiers without betraying the slightest hint of nervousness or revealing the true purpose of his presence. This required a different kind of courage, not the courage to face a physical threat, but the mental fortitude to live a lie every single day, where one slip of the tongue could unravel everything. These close calls and clever cover stories are more than just exciting anecdotes, they reveal the core of Knut Haugland's character. He wasn't just a brave soldier or a skilled technician. He was a brilliant innovator, a creative problem solver who could think on his feet under the most intense pressure imaginable. He fought his war not with brute force but with intellect and imagination. His ability to adapt, to turn the mundane into the clandestine and to hide in plain sight was the key to his survival and his success. It was this unique combination of bravery and brilliance that allowed a single teenager to consistently outwit the vast security apparatus of the Nazi regime. The intelligence that Knut Haugland painstakingly gathered and transmitted was not merely symbolic. It was strategically vital and had a direct, tangible impact on Allied military operations. His work was far more than just a gesture of defiance. Each message he sent was a crucial piece of a massive, complex puzzle being assembled by Allied planners in London. The information he provided on German troop concentrations, coastal defenses and naval movements allowed the Allies to build an incredibly detailed picture of the enemy's strength in Norway. This knowledge was invaluable, transforming blind guesswork into precision-guided strategy, directly influencing the planning of operations and targeted strikes. Think of his radio as a direct lifeline, a vital artery pumping critical information from occupied territory straight to Allied command. When Knut reported a German supply convoy moving along the coast, the Royal Navy could dispatch submarines or torpedo bombers to intercept it, choking the flow of resources to occupying forces. When he transmitted details about new anti-aircraft batteries, Allied bomber crews could adjust their flight paths to avoid heavily defended areas, significantly increasing their survival and mission success. His work was a force multiplier, making Allied actions more effective and less costly in lives and equipment. In one documented instance in 1943, Knut's work averted a major disaster. He intercepted German communications that revealed their plan to lay an ambush for an approaching Allied naval force. The Germans had anticipated the Allied route and were moving units into position to spring a devastating trap. Knut worked feverishly against the clock, knowing that lives hung in the balance. He successfully transmitted a detailed warning to London, outlining the enemy's precise location and intentions. This single piece of intelligence, sent from a hidden radio in the Norwegian wilderness, was a game-changer for the entire operation. Based directly on Knut's warning, Allied commanders completely altered the route of their naval squadron. The ships bypassed the ambush zone entirely, arriving safely at their destination without firing a single shot, their mission a success. The German forces were left waiting for a fleet that never appeared, their operation foiled by an invisible enemy they couldn't find. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of Allied sailors owed their lives to Knut Haugland's courage and skill. This was not an abstract victory. It was a clear, measurable success, where his intelligence directly prevented catastrophe and saved the lives of his comrades in arms. Perhaps the most famous and, honestly, the most strategically significant operation Knut Haugland was involved in was the legendary mission to destroy the Norsk Hydro heavy water plant in Vemork. This facility was the only one of its kind under German control, producing a substance absolutely essential for the development of an atomic reactor. Allied intelligence was deeply concerned that if the Nazis successfully developed a nuclear weapon, it could change the entire course of the war. The destruction of the Vemork plant was therefore a top priority, an absolutely critical objective. The mission, codenamed Operation Gunnerside, was a high-stakes commando raid that depended completely on flawless execution and perfect intelligence. Knut Haugland, along with his fellow radio operators on the Hardanger Plateau, served as the sole communication link for this vital operation. The team of Norwegian commandos on the ground, dropped into the frozen wilderness, were completely cut off from the outside world, except for the faint signal from Knut's radio. He was their connection to London, their source of updated orders, and their means of reporting progress. Before the raid, he relayed crucial weather reports and intelligence on German patrol schedules, allowing the team to choose the perfect moment to strike. His role was not peripheral. He was an integral member of the sabotage team, his weapon a telegraph key instead of a submachine gun. On the night of the raid, as the commandos silently made their way down the treacherous gorge to the plant, Knut was on standby, his nerves stretched to the breaking point. He waited in the freezing silence for the signal that would confirm their success or failure. After the commandos successfully planted their explosives and destroyed the heavy water production cells, they had to escape. It was Knut who transmitted the triumphant pre-arranged code word back to London Gunnerside successful. This message electrified the Allied High Command, confirming that a massive blow had been struck against Hitler's nuclear ambitions. His reliable signal was the first news the world received of this incredible victory. Historians and military analysts are unanimous in their assessment. Without the reliable radio link provided by Knut Haugland and his team, Operation Gunnerside would have almost certainly failed. The commandos would have been operating blind, unable to receive last-minute intelligence or coordinate with London. The mission's success was as much a triumph of signals intelligence as it was of battlefield bravery. Knut's ability to maintain communications under the most extreme conditions, while being relentlessly hunted by the enemy, was the invisible thread that held the entire daring enterprise together. His dots and dashes, sent from a remote mountain hideout, helped avert a potential nuclear nightmare. While his role in famous operations like Gunnerside is definitely a highlight, much of Knut's impact was felt in smaller daily acts of intelligence that collectively saved thousands of lives. His work was not always about spectacular sabotage. Often it was about the patient, meticulous gathering of information that gave the Allies a persistent day-to-day advantage. He became the eyes and ears for the Norwegian resistance on a local level, coordinating airdrops of weapons and supplies from Britain. His radio would guide Allied planes to secret drop zones, ensuring that the resistance fighters on the ground received the tools they needed to continue their struggle against the occupiers. Each successful supply drop was a small victory that strengthened the Milorg, the Norwegian underground army. These supplies allowed them to carry out their own sabotage missions, disrupting German supply lines, destroying infrastructure, and tying down thousands of German troops who could have otherwise been deployed to other fronts in Europe. Knut's radio was the critical link that made this support possible. He was the invisible quartermaster, his signals ensuring that the flame of resistance was not just kept alive, but was fanned into a fire that caused constant problems for the German war machine, diverting enemy resources and attention away from the main battlefronts. Furthermore, Knut's radio was an essential tool for helping people escape the Gestapo's grasp. When a resistance cell was compromised or a safe house was about to be raided, a quick, coded message from Knut could provide the warning needed for members to flee. He helped coordinate escape routes, known as the Shetland bus, where fishing boats would ferry fugitives and downed Allied airmen from the Norwegian coast to the safety of the Shetland Islands. His transmissions were a lifeline for those on the run, a beacon of hope that guided them through the darkness to freedom. Countless individuals owed their survival to a timely warning that originated from his hidden transmitter. Even after the war officially ended, his story remained largely hidden, buried in classified files and overshadowed by the grand narratives of generals and politicians. Yet, the impact of his actions is undeniable. He was a teenager who, through sheer brilliance and courage, directly influenced the outcome of major military operations, crippled a key part of the enemy's strategic weapons program, and saved an uncounted number of lives. His legacy is not written in grand monuments but in the successful missions, the averted disasters and the lives that were spared because of the secrets he plucked from the airwaves, fighting a lonely and heroic war from the shadows. In an age dominated by headlines about generals, armies, and grand political strategies, the story of Knut Haugland serves as a powerful reminder of a different kind of warfare. His battle was not fought with a rifle in his hands or from the cockpit of a fighter plane. He never led a battalion into a frontal assault. Instead, he wielded weapons that were far more subtle but just as potent: intelligence, technical innovation, and raw courage. He fought a war of frequencies and electrons, a clandestine struggle where victory was measured in decoded messages and averted disasters. His story proves that history is shaped not only by massive forces, but by the quiet brilliance of a single individual working in the shadows. Knut's journey demonstrates that tools of defiance can be found in unexpected places. For him, it was a childhood fascination with radios, a hobby pursued in the quiet of his bedroom. He transformed this passion into a formidable weapon against one of history's most oppressive regimes. This narrative resonates deeply in our modern world, where technology is more accessible than ever before. We celebrate the ingenuity of young coders, ethical hackers, and digital activists who use their skills to challenge injustice and promote transparency. Knut Haugland was a pioneer of this ethos, a precursor to the modern tech-savvy innovator who understands that information is power and that a keyboard, or in his case a telegraph key, can be a revolutionary tool. His story challenges our conventional notions of what a hero looks like. He was barely out of his teens when he took on the full might of the Nazi war machine, armed with little more than a homemade radio and encyclopedic knowledge of how it worked. He proves that impacting the world doesn't require formal titles or official permission. It requires a specific skill, the audacity to apply it boldly, and the conviction to see it through despite overwhelming risk. His legacy is a testament to the power of specialized knowledge combined with fierce dedication to a cause greater than oneself. Ultimately, Knut's story celebrates the human intellect as an instrument of resistance. Long before the age of the internet, before Wi-Fi signals blanketed our cities and encrypted messaging apps became commonplace, there was a teenager tapping out Morse code in the snow. He was defying an empire not with explosions, but with sparks of static and carefully modulated radio waves. He reminds us that the most powerful engine for change is the human mind itself, its capacity for learning, its ability to innovate under pressure, and its unwavering search for freedom, even when surrounded by tyranny. The story of Knut Haugland matters today because it speaks to the timeless nature of courage. His bravery was not the momentary explosive courage of the battlefield charge, it was a quieter, more enduring form of valor. It was the courage to wake up every single morning in a freezing, isolated cabin, knowing that a well-equipped enemy was actively hunting you. It was the courage to power up a transmitter, knowing that the signal could be a death sentence. It was the courage to live a life of constant gnawing fear and psychological pressure, yet to continue performing a critical mission with precision and unwavering focus day after day for years on end. This narrative provides a vital lesson for younger generations. It illustrates that you do not need to wait for adulthood or for some official designation to make a difference. Knut's most impactful work was done when he was a young man, leveraging the skills he had developed as a teenager. His story is a powerful call to action, showing that passion, curiosity, and self-directed learning can forge skills that have real-world consequences. It tells every young person tinkering with a computer, learning to code, or exploring a scientific passion that their knowledge has potential and their contributions can be meaningful, often in ways they cannot yet imagine. Furthermore, Knut's legacy underscores the critical importance of those who work behind the scenes. History often focuses on the visible leaders, the charismatic speakers, and the decorated soldiers, but for every successful military operation, there is a network of unseen supporters, intelligence analysts, and technical experts like Knut, who made it possible. His story pulls back the curtain on the hidden machinery of history, honoring the quiet, indispensable work of the intelligence operative. It reminds us that victory is often secured not on the front lines, but through the patient, perilous work of those who gather the information that guides the hands of power. In the end, the story of the genius teen who outwitted the Nazis with a homemade radio is more than just a thrilling war story. It is a testament to the idea that one person's ingenuity can alter the course of history. It proves that you don't need an army to fight an empire. Sometimes all you need is the will to resist and a well-placed wire. Knut Haugland's life is a powerful broadcast that still resonates today, a signal that transmits a clear and enduring message. Imagination, when paired with courage, is one of the most powerful forces for good in the human arsenal. When the guns of World War II finally fell silent and peace returned to the scarred landscapes of Europe, Knut Haugland's secret war came to an end. He emerged from the shadows not as a celebrated public figure, but as a quiet hero whose most significant contributions remained locked away in classified government files. He did not seek accolades or parades. For him, the victory was the liberation of his homeland, the sight of the Norwegian flag flying freely once again. He had faced down a terrifying empire and survived, his integrity and his spirit intact. He lived to see the peace that he had risked everything to help secure, a future he had helped to write with his own hands, one dot and one dash at a time. His life after the war was a testament to his adventurous and indomitable spirit. He did not simply fade into obscurity. In 1947 he was invited by the famed explorer Thor Heyerdahl to join the legendary Kon-Tiki expedition. His role, unsurprisingly, was that of the radio operator. For 101 days he sat aboard a primitive balsa wood raft, drifting across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Once again, he was the vital communications link, his radio signals the only connection between the tiny raft and the rest of the world. It was a different kind of isolation, a different kind of challenge, but it required the same skill, patience and nerve that he had demonstrated in the mountains of Norway. Upon his return to Norway, he dedicated his life to preserving the history he had helped to create. He served as the director of Norway's Resistance Museum in Oslo, a position he held for decades. In this role, he ensured that the stories of the men and women who fought in the shadows would not be forgotten. He became the custodian of their memory, honoring the sacrifices of his comrades and educating a new generation about the true cost of freedom. He understood better than anyone that the quiet acts of courage, the secret battles fought in cellars and on frozen plateaus, were as crucial to the nation's story as the public monuments and official histories. Yet, for many years, the world still did not know the full power and scope of what he had accomplished during the war. His story was often a footnote in the larger sagas of sabotage and espionage, his personal bravery and technical genius overshadowed by the grander narratives. But the truth of his impact endures. With a homemade radio, a brilliant mind, and a heart tuned to the frequency of freedom, a teenager from a quiet Norwegian valley played a pivotal role in the defeat of tyranny. His legacy is a quiet echo, a reminder that some of history's greatest minds work in silence, their victories known only to a few. Knut Haugland's story is a powerful testament to the forgotten heroes of history, the individuals whose brilliance shines brightest just outside the spotlight. His life challenges us to look beyond the headlines and the statues, to seek out the stories of those who wielded intellect and innovation as their primary weapons. He represents a different kind of soldier, one whose battlefield was the electromagnetic spectrum, and whose courage was measured in his ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast a technologically superior foe. His legacy is not just a tale of wartime espionage, it is a celebration of human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds, a story that continues to inspire. If this story of a genius teenager who took on an empire has moved you, please consider giving this video a like and sharing it with others who appreciate the hidden narratives of history. By doing so, you help us continue our mission to uncover the forgotten minds who have shaped our world. Don't forget to subscribe to History's Greatest Minds and click the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We believe that these stories are more important than ever, as they show us the incredible potential that lies within each of us to make a difference, often with the tools we already have at our disposal. We want to hear from you. Who is another forgotten genius whose story deserves to be told? Let us know in the comments below which brilliant mind we should uncover in a future video. Your suggestions help guide our research and bring new incredible stories to light for our community. Coming up next on our channel, we will explore the astonishing life of the deaf mathematician who taught NASA to land on the moon, another tale of overcoming adversity through sheer intellectual power. Join us as we continue to explore the depths of human achievement, one incredible story at a time. Until then, keep asking questions. Keep looking for the stories that lie between the lines of your history books. Because as the life of Knut Haugland so powerfully demonstrates, history is not only made by those who hold official power or command great armies, it is also, and perhaps more importantly, made by those with courage, by those with conviction, and most of all, by those with imagination. Their frequency is one that resonates across the decades, reminding us that the human spirit is the most powerful transmitter of all.